Today, we are going to be talking about crafting effective written guides. This is something that is very important for the community, very important for the ongoing contest, which we will touch on for a moment. So on our agenda today, some of the key things we're going to touch on is first we talk about the ongoing competition and how some of what we're going to discuss can relate to that for you. Then we're going to go over the bones of effective guides. We're going to talk about audience consideration as well, remembering your audience. And then we have a special section all about visual aids and video accompaniments. And then some little things that didn't exactly fit into a category, so we're calling them knowledge nuggets. And then I think it'd be fun if kind of towards the end, we did a live sort of, doc writing with your help. So lots to look forward to, lots to go over. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to SeeingBlue.
Yeah, so like we said, today's workshop is, sort of related to the competition. So there is a tutorial mini challenge you guys can participate in, and there are some submission guidelines for your tutorials. So we just want to go over those real quick before we get into tips and tricks for actually writing your documentation. So, of course, the format's important. Must be written step by step, how-to guide or tutorial. I think the technical format is Markdown, so MD files, so they can be submitted to GitHub. The length is also a factor. They want a minimum of 500 words. Title must be clear and descriptive. An introduction, so the guide must begin with a brief explanation of task or work or the workflow that you'll be talking about. Format, length, title, introduction, instructions, of course, that's the core of any good tutorial, is a set of step-by-step instructions. Also, they want us to include some visuals, screenshots to tie in. And then there's also an optional short form video that we can attach to our documentation as well. And so this is going to be related to what we're talking about today.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. So when you're writing a document, I think it's really important to kind of set out a sort of approach that you want to take, get your mind in the right spot, because it's not just putting words on paper or a Google Doc or Markdown file in GitHub. It's so much more than just words, right? So something that I find in tutorials I've seen, documents I've read, a lot of YouTube content that I've consumed is they often kind of miss out on the why behind the doing rather than, touching on or instead focusing on, just like we're doing this because it works this way. And so this is what we're going for, right? So a lot of the knowledge that's absorbed is in the trial and error phase that tutorials cut out, right? So I think that a good tutorial is not only just about we're doing this because it works this way because I said to do it this way, but you can use that as a way to share like key information that you've learned when you were putting this together or working on getting to where you are now. So helping your audience understand these motivations for doing it this way, things like, oh, well, we do it this way because it has a positive boost on our performance, or it's more reliable than doing it this other way, or future proofing, whatever. It can really make that content more impactful, as well as sharing more valuable knowledge and help, kind of up level people instead of just congrats, you did it. So something that we highlighted here is this idea of a problem solution framework, right? So the first step here is to identify what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is maybe a common pain point or, something that people get stuck on a lot, and how can we overcome that, right? So then you think about the struggle, right? If you're writing a tutorial, if you're writing a guide, you've been there. So you know what to do now, right? So there's a lot of opportunity, as I said, to share the why, to share that struggle, to help the reader kind of understand. So there's a lot of valuable and meaningful insight to share here. And of course, and most importantly, is the solution, right? These are the clear, actionable, measured, step-by-step steps to success, to getting the finished product.
So do tutorials have bones, right? And what makes a good strong skeleton for your tutorials? So let's talk about the different parts in a little more detail. So you've got your title and your introduction. So an example of a good title. So the title is meant to attract the right reader and clearly state the content's purpose. You want to use keywords, action, verbs, and state the outcome. So instead of using something like a title that says using the asset pool gizmo, you might flesh it out a little more and create a title along the lines of how to build a per player HUD with the asset gizmo in 5 steps. So it's a little more clear, and you're setting the expectation up front with the first line, right? And then you've got an introduction. Introduction is to establish context. So state the problem and explain the value of the solution. This is the why of the end result and maybe who the guide is for. So instead of this guide will show you how to use the asset gizmo, for example, you might say, tired of players sharing the same UI? This guide teaches you how to create unique per player heads-up displays using the asset gizmo, giving your world a professional and personalized feel. So sounds a little better, gives the reader a little more clear expectation. And then the prerequisites and the context. So setting expectations for the journeys as far as the skills that might be needed or the tools that might be needed. And then the context should resemble somewhat of a recipe ingredients list, the things that you will need. So for prerequisites, like I said, we just want to ensure the reader is prepared to prevent frustration. So you'll list software, assets, required knowledge. Instead of something like, you will need the Horizon Worlds editor, you might say, before you begin, please ensure you have the Horizon Worlds desktop editor, basic knowledge of adding objects to the world, and maybe a simple button public asset from the asset library, depending on the context of your documentation.
One thing I do want to add real quick
Go ahead.
is on the prerequisites and context, especially. Like, I think that section is really critical for helping people make an informed decision on, is this going to be worth my time, right? If you pull up a guide and it says you're supposed to have 10 years experience as a master programmer with like 12 different languages under your belt, like, I don't need to even bother reading this. So setting expectations of what's needed before jumping into it is really important for helping people know that they're in the right spot for the right thing.
So the next part of a effective guide is going to be the main part, your step-by-step instructions. And so, this arguably should require the most attention. You want to have clear, actionable, measured steps as the reader progresses through the guide. You can use a numbered list, try to use one action per step, and then maybe add some visuals to your steps as well. So instead of saying next, you should add the gizmo, you might say have a one and use an action verb in the very beginning that says add the asset pool gizmo, and then elaborate from the top menu, navigate to gizmos, asset pool, and click to add it to your world. So you don't want to assume that the reader knows anything really. As an experienced creator, you do take a lot for granted, and you just want to really put yourself in the mindset of the reader, especially the mindset of a beginner, right? And so don't assume that any of the steps are too simple or that you can just gloss over it. And then conclusions, we've got provide reference. So yeah, provide references to the expected outcome so the readers can check their work. Once, And so basically that's to say, create the finished product and give it to them as an example, right? It says offer insights as to suggested maintenance focuses, follow points of consideration, and reflections on key takeaways. So, highlight, potential areas where there may be issues that the users are going to run into, recap what was learned, and let's see, what's the last bullet point say? Provide links to relevant. Yeah, so if there's any related documentation or any continued learning, the conclusions and the end of the tutorial is a good place to put that as well. And so I've got an example, and for a conclusion, instead of simply, you have now added a HUD to your world, congratulations. Elaborate a little more. Maybe instead of that, you say, congratulations, you successfully built a dynamic per player HUD. To verify it's working, enter the preview mode and notice how the UI attaches to your view. As next steps, try connecting the player stats to the text fields you just created or something along those lines. Anything else you want to add to that, Guru?
Yeah, something that's kind of like bumping around in my head right now is the improv yes and principle, right? And that is to state that you never just like shut something down. You build on it, right? You keep it going. So I think that with this final section of a guide, instead of just being like, boom, you're done, bye, is great to say, here's your finished product. Here are some options on how you might be able to take it further. I encourage you, if you want to continue reading, here's this information. And just allowing your reader the opportunity with a little bit of guidance to be able to build on what they learned, what they have accomplished, and just keep it going, right? Keep that knowledge and that growth going, I think is really, really important. Also really important is kind of like Blue had touched on a little bit, is remembering your audience. I think this is a really big one, especially for me, because not everybody gets you like you do, right? Not everybody has the same way of thinking, the same experience, the same skills. So making your guides accessible to all skill levels, all backgrounds as best as possible is really important. So some of the things that we could do is we could make the guide accessible through clear and widely understandable language or terminology. And that's critical, right? So this would be avoid using terms, acronyms like CUI, UAB, FBI, or technical words like doohickey or thingamabob. But seriously though, I can't tell you how many times I've read a document as a beginner myself, back in the day where I'm like, I don't know what that means. And, it might be a Horizon specific thing that if I go to Google and I'm like, what is this? It's not gonna help me understand because it doesn't know, right? So there's a lot of things out there that are scary, that are unclear, that are unknown to people who are trying to learn, but that inaccessible terminology can sometimes actually be counterintuitive to the whole point of the guide. So the next point is if you do have the knowledge, if you do use those advanced terminologies, or technical terms, is TGIF okay? Always, always, yeah. But if you are using those things, at least take the time to explain, right? It could be simple parentheses next to CUI. It's like, you know, like when building your CUI, custom user interface, and help up level the people so they can talk the talk, as they say. This adds so much more value in such little time to your guide and makes it so much more uh, uh, um, educational. It's something that people might share, people might look forward to the next one because, oh, wow, I actually learned so much more than just like how to do blah, blah, blah. Everybody wins. So it's great. Another thing too is no detail is too small for the most part, but no detail is too small. And this is to say, you know, you don't want to assume that everybody knows, that in that menu is where you find that thing, right? So if you're like, pull out a custom UI gizmo, but you don't specify maybe that it's that, menu up at the top left corner, like people might not understand that. And that's a point where they get stuck, right? And if maybe you didn't have a picture that helped at least highlight where to find that menu or how to get to the gizmo section or whatever the case may be, you don't want to assume that everybody knows what you're already talking about, even if you think it's really, really simple. So there's a few things that maybe it is a small detail like turn on your computer, whatever. But for the most part is to cater to people, format it as in a way that anybody at any level could pick it up, as long as it's of course within the prerequisite. So yeah, visual aids.
Yeah, so as you're writing your documents, of course, Horizon's a very visual platform, and your documents should also be very visual as well. And actually, I think we mentioned that's one of, might I say, requirements for the competition. So obviously, I prefer pictures over reading. I think a lot of people do. So keep it relevant. Visual material should support the written words by highlighting the key concepts. Keep it digestible. Visual aids should be consumed quickly without requiring extensive time or effort to comprehend. So they should just be able to look right at it, not too much clutter, and get the point, pretty quickly, right? And then include meaningful markups. So make clear and purposeful markups to highlight the key focal points and avoid excessive or intrusive markings to maintain focus. So I've got a couple examples here of a good markup and a bad markup, right? So in our top image, we've got a screenshot of the entire screen. It's breaking some of the rules that we set over here in our bullet points. It's got irrelevant media on the page. It's got distractions on the page. Guru leaked my address in a Discord message on that page. And then the annotations are confusing as well. There's three circles and then there's a vague message. And so it's overall it's not a great example, right? But below, this is a much better example. We focused in on the section of the menu that we're talking about. We've made an attempt to blur out any parts of the screen that weren't relevant to the discussion. And we have clearly marked the steps with bright red boxes that are easy to see, and they're also numbered. So instead of creating multiple images per step, combine them all into one image by adding the numbers to each step. So I've got a 1 through 5 here. And essentially, you should just click on 1 first, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Pretty straightforward. I even added a little text for context on 2 and 3, showing that these toggles are meant to be turned off in this particular example. So just a simple or small example of a good and bad UI there. Anything you want to add, Guru?
Yeah. So one, I just want to say it was very fun creating the bad example. So much fun. But importantly is kind of noting that this, and I think it's on the next slide actually, but this good example could be saved and referenced without even needing, for this particular section, could be saved and referenced later on without even needing to look back at the guide, right? Because okay, so when I'm doing this little bit, this picture here shows me that I need to go here first, then here, 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 and there, right? This is simple, it's digestible, it's quick, it's easy, it's clean, and that is super duper important. I did want to touch briefly, you had mentioned like combining everything into, one image. And that is, of course, within a degree, you don't want to put too much into one image because then it can also become confusing. But that was just a quick note that I wanted to put on there. But overall, like I think the difference between bad versus good is like so important. So yeah, formatting your visuals so readers can reference and understand them independently later is very important. The visuals aren't just to have pictures, they contain information and concepts, and they do so usually in a way that's like actually a little even more accessible sometimes than the written words. So Another type of media that you can have is video. So, having a video, this is actually a really great thing here. If you've already written your guide and you want to make a video, well, you've already done the hard part of writing your script because that's your guide, right? That's the written part. So you can easily take what you've written and read it out as narration for your video. And then video also allows you to leverage, some powerful post-production techniques to add meaningful visuals and emphasis to help really drive home those focus areas and key concepts. And it's super shareable, right? You can share a video to Instagram, to the Discord, to Facebook, YouTube, all the above. And that can help drive traffic to your document. Your document can help drive traffic to your video. Your video might reach an audience that your document might not. So highly, highly, highly recommend having a supporting video to go with it, because not everyone maybe wants to read, and that's okay. So my advice with videos, and this comes from Space Glitter Unicorn, is keep it simple, silly. So your video should be short form, well paced, and ultimately it's like the perfect companion to your written guide. And as I mentioned, it can potentially connect you to a wider audience. So again, you can find, your style, your voice, how you want to do that. But again, like a video is just like, if you've done the guide, video is like just that extra little cherry on top that can really take it just all that much further.
So just a little bit more information, some knowledge nuggets, important tidbits to remember. First of all, credit yourself. Include a clear listing of your name/username as the author, ideally at the top of your tutorial, right? Also, provide some important information. In addition to the name, include the most recent date of modification. This is going to help our readers make informed decisions about the relevancy and value of the guide. Seek out peer review. Put it in front of your friends. Put it in front of people who aren't your friends. Your friends are a lot of times they're going to be nice, but maybe find someone that doesn't care to hurt your feelings. So share your draft with friends and experts to get meaningful suggestions or even fact checking, your steps. And then update as needed. So keeping the content relevant is important. If a feature has been depreciated or if something has changed, be sure to go back to your document and keep it updated.
I really, really, really want to drive emphasis on 2 points. Is one, credit yourself. Credit yourself and have that data modification, because if someone comes up to a tutorial and is like, oh wow, this was last edited like February 12th of 2021, might not be what they want to read. So make sure that you have as much information as possible, who you are that wrote it, when you last edited this, to help really make those informed decisions. And then also, and again, super important, is that peer review. There might be things that someone else will catch, whether that's like silly spelling mistakes or critical things like, oh, that doesn't actually work that way, or your technical knowledge is like 100%. And that's not to bash you in your ability, but it ultimately just helps create the most well-rounded, accurate document for everyone to learn from. In the time that we have left, I thought it would be fun that maybe we could just live write a document. So let's shift over. So we're gonna like rough draft this out here. So we need a volunteer from the audience, please. Suggestions for something, let's keep it kind of simple, but something that maybe we could pretend that we're writing a guide on. And we'll kind of like go through that. So any suggestions whatsoever pertaining to Horizon, preferably? So we got a lot of great suggestions. So I like this idea, but I think this attaching a script to an object maybe sounds like a good spot to start. Lou, what do you think?
Attaching the script to an object. Yeah, either that one or how to play a trigger event or how to create a trigger event to play audio. I think both of those are probably good options.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, yeah. So a trigger event, play audio, and then we can also attach that to an object. So yeah, we're gonna see how far we can get in about 10 minutes. So okay, so step number one. Anybody? Title. Otter. She says, shouldn't we be doing this on Markdown? For the final product, yes, but for the rough draft speed run, I'm not proficient enough in Markdown. So I'm gonna sit in my comfort zone of Google Docs. Okay, so we're gonna put our title. So this would be, also feel free to like shout things out in the chat as we go through this. It doesn't have to be just watching me struggle to
This
speed
is
type.
this is a group effort.
Yes, community project.
A clear, what do you guys think about a clear and concise title? What if it was something like play like play audio when players enter your trigger gizmos
Hmm.
in 3 steps. I don't know.
I think this is important to include that it's in TypeScript. Well, yeah, I think, yeah, by the participants, the written guides workshop last updated. When is today?
21st.
21st. Call out. So last updated. So what comes next? We need to kind of inform people what they're getting into, right? Provide a little context, a little prerequisite. So just call it out. What are some things that people should know about this guide if we're triggering audio via TypeScript? What are some things they should have, some things that they should maybe know before they get into it? For one, I think the Horizon desktop editor is needed. And maybe
Probably Visual Studio Code, right?
Visual Studio Code.
I was gonna say I was gonna get off of the hardware or the software. Well, you're gonna need a computer. But we might also talk about like the kind of skill level that's expected in this tutorial. And then maybe some existing knowledge.
Yep. I think that was one of the ones I was looking for, is like beginner knowledge of TypeScript.
Gizmos.
Yeah, I was gonna say should we go as far as to list the entity types or
I think so. With this, thinking about, at least the way that I'm thinking right here, is the sort of like the ingredients list as far as to complete this tutorial, right? And that in the tutorial, we'll get into, when we're in it, we'll talk about getting the triggers, getting the script set up and whatnot. But that you can't even start the tutorial if you don't have these things here is kind of where my mind is at on that. Does that make sense? Am I being stubborn? Okay. So yeah, so prerequisites, and then like a little paragraph just of like getting started. So this could be something like, in this tutorial, small enough, I think maybe someone with no TypeScript knowledge could use it to get a foothold into scripting, perhaps. Yeah, that's actually a great call out. So we'll mark that as like optional. In this tutorial, you will learn the basics of
is this the
basics.
stage where you give links to these things? I think you could. I don't know that we'll go through with that here, but I think you definitely could.
Yeah, you could very easily link to some of these things. In this tutorial, you'll learn the basics of triggering audio via TypeScript, subscribing to trigger events, Yeah, I think that's kind of it, really. Oh, and linking scripts to entities within the world. Okay. So from here, I think we could jump into some steps. So we can have like step 1. So we need to be in the desktop editor. So here we need, let's see, you could also link to some other foundational tutorials. Yes, absolutely. So here, if I'm running through this, like, so we're doing triggered audio. The first things first, I would say, well, we need to get an audio to play. So what I might do is come down here, say filter to audio. And as you're going through it is actually a great time to be thinking about your visuals, right? So in this case, like I could go right here, and now that I have this library open, you know, I like to put my cursor over it to kind of highlight which one I'm selecting, then just do print screen. And then like we can snip that right there. So that image can be taken and show, you know, the location of the asset library window, what tab we're in, you know, maybe which one we're picking on. So you can kind of walk through it, and as you do, be mindful of grabbing the media as you go. So we have that. The other thing we would need is in the Gizmos tab. So with this is a good point where if I included a screenshot where I'd already clicked on that Gizmos menu, this looks different. People are going to run into something that looks different than what you show, right? So this could be a good example of capturing this first menu. If you use a snipping tool on Windows, they do have a delay timer that can allow you to set up the capture drop-down highlights, etc. Ooh, interesting. I've been using it as a print screen button, but that is actually really good to know. So like this might be a good case of where you need to have like two pictures kind of like cut together to show, you know, hey, here's this first menu. Then you click on this, you can get here to the trigger gizmo. So I'd capture both of those menus for people to be able to see.
Yeah, that's a good, even a potentially like a good instance. I know we said try to combine steps into one image, but sometimes the steps aren't in the same image, so you don't really have an option all the time.
So now that we have those things brought out, let's say like step 1 is select the audio you wish to select.
Of course, with a little bit of photo editing skills, you can still make it into one image though.
So from here, come over. And again, just keep in mind too, this is of course very, very, very rough draft. Screenshots. So if you go and you break up your process into steps, right? You can then just, you know, come back, you know, you go make it go a little further, come back, keep writing. So something else too that I'm thinking of is if you start your step with the key thing that's happening and highlight that, right? So step number 1, what we're doing is we're selecting audio from the asset library. Anything after that is just kind of extra, right? So could have like, it could have something like this is this being the asset library is located at the bottom left of the viewport. So from here, step number 2 would be add a trigger gizmo into the scene. And key takeaway here, what we're doing is adding a trigger gizmo. So I'll highlight that. And then in here, I can drop in, and I would take the time to edit these two together, but I can drop in my screenshots here. Oh, that's giant. So I'll shrink these just a little bit. So I would put like important note. The gizmos window is a sub menu as shown here, right? Something like this to basically illustrate the concept that it's not a one-click thing. You have to click into here to get to this other spot. And that just helps eliminate some of the confusion on if I only show the second picture, oh, well, I got here, so what is this, right? So that idea of no step too small. Don't assume everyone knows even like the super basic stuff, right out of the gate. So from here, right, if we go back to Horizon, we have our audio gizmo in the scene, we have the trigger in the scene. What's next? Oh, we need a script, right? Oh gosh, I have way too many scripts in here. So what we could say is, we'll call this audio trigger demo. I'd take a screenshot here. And this would be a really excellent opportunity, as Blue had done for the good illustration with the boxes, is you could highlight the clicks, right? So click to scripts, click to plus, click, name it. So that would be where I would take the time to do that. Is there. So I'll come back here to here, 2, 3, create a new script. That's step 3, create a new script in the scripting panel. And then add in the image. And again, taking the time normally, I know we're already running a little over time, but taking the time to highlight and curate your images to be insightful, to have clear instruction throughout them. I'm also just going to take a moment because, like I said, we are over time a little bit. I'm just going to drop that survey link in. So while I'm sort of rambling through the last little bit of this, feel free to please take that survey and share a thumbs up in the chat after you have done so. But yeah, I feel, how are we feeling about where we're at so far? Blue, anything you feel?
Well, I think the point we get the point across as far as, doing the step by step. If you want to skip ahead and just do the conclusion where we, kind of give an example of the finished product and then any references that we might need or next steps potentially.
Yeah, great call out. Actually, that's really great. Yeah, a little hyper focus there on like trying to do the whole thing. So yeah, so for the conclusion, what?
I'm just laughing at Todd's comment. Next step is profit.
Oh, yeah, monetize everything. Yeah, so here we are. We're at the end of the guide. We've done the steps. Now we need to help the follower understand we're at the end. What comes next, right? So blah 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 blah. All the steps. Do. Now that you have completed this guide, you should expect that when you enter the trigger, the audio will play, right? And in this case, this is something it's super easy to explain just through words. You could have, a picture, a snippet of, some completed code, something like that to show visually, kind of the finished product. So, but in this case, since it's literally, this would be like only like 2 or 3 lines of code. I'm not going to worry about that, but you get the idea. So in conclusion, something that I would like to add is like potential issues. So this is where I'd highlight things that maybe you want to look out for, right? If your audio is not playing.
Some common pitfalls, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Check the following. Following, right? Is the script linked to the trigger? Is the audio gizmo linked in the props section of the triggers properties panel? Is the audio gizmo levels set correctly?
Is the world running? Yeah.
Is the world running? Is your world volume up? Things like these are great for beginners who might not know about these different things, right? And that's where then they'd be like, oh, but this seems so simple. Like, why is it just not working? Like, so thinking ahead to potential problems people might run into and helping them through them preemptively, like if they run into them, is great. And you could also here provide visual references of where to check for, is it linked to the trigger? Is it defined in the properties panel, et cetera, et cetera. So potential issues is a great thing to add. So we could also talk about like potential like modifications, right? Or we could say like helpful resources. So from here, right, you could say like official meta documentation. And then like link to that, right? In Horizon, developers, they have all sorts of great stuff. We could talk about linking to the audio gizmo. There's not saying that. Gizmos. Gizmos. Trail effects. Okay, maybe trigger. Here we go. So like linking to information about the trigger gizmo. So like, boom, there's a link there. And I would format this to be a little bit better. Official meta documentation, like check out my other guides, right? I don't know, like I'll just, not that I have other guides on my website, but things like this, or like stuck, question mark, check out community forums at, and then here's a link to that. But giving people really great next steps, actionable next steps, is so valuable. And again, like I said, thinking preemptively of things that they might run into. How do you address that? How do you help them through that? Show or link examples of tutorial results in some other games. That's great. Yeah. It's like see it in action, right? And then that's like a link to a Horizon world. That's actually a really great call out. So yeah, it is, again, this is a very, very rough draft, but I think it does sufficient. It's sufficient in highlighting the key concepts here. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope all of you have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing the documents that you do.
Yeah, good luck on your tutorial entries, guys.